Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for the session on baking TSMO and all we do in transportation. My name is Tracy Scriba. I'm the team lead in the Office of Operations at Federal Highway Administration Headquarters. I'm a moderator for today's session. Before we get started, I'd like to go over some housekeeping items. First of all, ITE would like to thank champion sponsors, Gannett Fleming, Siemens, and TransSoft Solutions for their support of the conference. Also like to thank Kimley Horn for sponsoring this week's session. In today's session, we'll have speaker presentations first, followed by a session of Q&A and discussion. We encourage you throughout the session to type your questions into the chat panel as they come to mind throughout the session, and then we'll address as many as we can after all of the presentations. If the session does end before all questions are answered, some of our speakers may be able to answer additional questions in the Wonder Room after the session. To access Wonder, you can go to the conference platform where you selected this session and select Hallway Talk, then go into the technical sessions area. At the end of the session, we'll confirm the speakers that can spend a few additional minutes in the Wonder Room after the session. Your attendance in this session does include PDH credits. The link for receiving PDH credits is shared in the chat box, so be sure to save that link to access the post-session evaluations. The recording of this session will be available in the ITE Learning Hub within 48 hours for all meeting registrants. So before we get started, I'd like to introduce our speakers for today's session. I'll be kicking us off with an introductory session or a little overview of the topic of today, baking TSMO and all we do in transportation, and what that means and how that connects to mainstreaming operations throughout transportation agencies. And then our next speaker will be Doug Tomlinson. He's the Chief of Highway Safety and Traffic Operations for Pennsylvania DOT. Then we'll be followed by Chad Allen. He's a program manager for Asset and Performance Management Team with Seattle Department of Transportation. Then we have Denise Marco. She is the Director of TSMO Program for the Eastern Transportation Coalition. And then we have Brent Kane. He's the Division Director of TSMO for Arizona Department of Transportation. So we have a great set of panelists today to share their thoughts on baking TSMO and everything we do in transportation. Detailed speaker bios are available on the website under the session description. So now we're going to go right into the presentations. And again, I encourage you, as you have questions, to put them in the chat pod so we can answer them after the session's presentations. So we will start with my kickoff presentation. Thank you for joining us. Hello, I'm going to kick us off today in our session on baking TSMO into everything you do in transportation. I'm going to start off by giving a broad overview of mainstreaming TSMO, what it is, and what seems to matter in helping to mainstream TSMO. This is the overview for my presentation. I'll talk about kind of the defining terms up front. I'll tell you a little bit about an FHWA project on mainstreaming TSMO that's led to the content of this presentation. I'll highlight a few focus areas that we have found through the research are key to helping to increasingly mainstream TSMO in transportation areas. And I will illustrate some products that we are developing through this project and some real-world examples from state DOTs. First of all, what is TSMO? I think many of us are familiar with transportation systems management and operations, but briefly, this is the federal definition from the federal legislation on the screen here. And basically, TSMO takes a collection of strategies and tries to integrate them to work together to optimize the performance of the transportation system. These strategies are operational in nature, but they are as a wide variety. They are multimodal. They both work on the supply side of the transportation and on the demand side of transportation, really seeking to make the best use of all the capacity that we have for good performance on the system. So transportation agencies can get the most out of their transportation dollar with TSMO, both future expenditures as well as those dollars spent building facilities in the past. The more an agency can get out of the capacity they have, the more options they have for how to spend future resources. So this is smart for transportation. TSMO is being integrated more and more into how agencies deliver transportation. So to move on to mainstreaming TSMO, what do we mean by that? Mainstreaming TSMO, the way we've defined it kind of across this project, is that TSMO and its strategies are readily understood, valued, and available for use to agency leadership and key staff, regardless of where they sit in the organization. So there's the understood, that there's an awareness of TSMO and understanding its benefits and what it can and can't do, and then valuing that and seeing how it can be used in their efforts, no matter where they sit in the organization. So there are several benefits to mainstreaming TSMO. First of all, agencies have a broader range of strategies to address transportation needs. There is not just, the kind of traditional approaches of adding more lanes or interchanges and such when there are challenges, but there's also things like traffic incident management, signal timing. There's also demand management and looking at the split between different modes. There are using technology to make adaptive changes to the system as the conditions change. There's also a benefit that operations staff and staff across other disciplines across the agency can work together to more efficiently and effectively deliver transportation strategies. So planners will know that TSMO strategies are available, and when they're looking to address issues, they can incorporate them into looking at alternatives. Designers can incorporate TSMO strategies as part of their designs to help get the most out of any changes they'll be making on the system and any new capacity they'll be adding. And then thirdly, transportation system users ultimately should experience a safer, more reliable trip and have a cost-effective use of transportation dollars. So our Federal Highway Mainstreaming TSMO project that I led over the last few years here has looked at how can we support mainstreaming TSMO in transportation agencies and across transportation agencies. And we did have a TSMO expert panel to provide some input representing a range of transportation agencies. We also held some interviews with TSMO champions, some virtual workshops for discussion, and did a literature review. As you can see there, we have a number of products that will be coming out of this effort, from some white papers, case studies, and some shorter brochures and similar kind of products. So I'm going to now talk about the focus areas that the project looked at. These are the 4 areas we looked at in the project: policies and processes, agency culture, decision-making and information management systems, and business case or business case for TSMO, and how all of those can work to mainstream TSMO in transportation agencies. I'm going to walk through each of these now. So first, the policies and processes. Why policies and processes? Well, they really help, they affect the day-to-day business of how the organization runs. They help formalize TSMO strategies and make sure that they are considered and integrated across different aspects of the agency and the project lifecycle. They really help look at TSMO as a solution strategy that can be used to solve issues. And there's a lot of opportunities to engage other staff and promote consistent application of the strategies through policies and processes. So a few examples in this area that we found, for example, the Maryland Department of Transportation issued a TSMO directive to all staff to establish an integrated approach to implementation of TSMO and increase awareness of TSMO. Texas DOT developed a statewide TSMO strategic plan and then had their districts work on TSMO plans for their specific regions of the state. Pennsylvania DOT is in the process of developing a TSMO guidebook series. We'll hear a little bit about that later in this session. And those guidebooks help give their staff an indication of how to better implement TSMO in what they're doing across the agency. So overall, these are examples of the types of policies and processes we looked at in the project. So you can see there's business practices, planning and project development, agency manuals and guidance documents, having TSMO committees that help different departments work together, staff positions and an organizational structure that can be supportive, and performance management. So the second area I want to talk about that we focus area for this project was looking at agency culture. I think we all know organizational culture can really set the direction for an agency and affect how things are done on a day-to-day basis. So it can help establish TSMO as a value tool to help the agency accomplish its mission and provide effective transportation. So some of the kind of things that come up with agency culture, maybe it's buy-in from senior leadership so that what everyone is hearing as direction from the top does support TSMO efforts. Looking at TSMO as a low-cost, quick solutions, and here's some quick examples and quick wins can help affect agency culture of support for TSMO. And then clear, obvious examples of successes are also helpful. So Washington State DOT has a newly formed TSMO council with liaisons from each of their primary functional areas in the DOT. That's one example. Iowa DOT has also developed a TSMO steering committee to help coordinate TSMO efforts and raise awareness. Another example is Tennessee DOT. They sent their leaders to a regional operations leadership forum that helped share TSMO information and engage discussions from the leadership level as well as staff level. The third area I'll touch on is decision-making and information management. Now, why is that important? Well, that's where a lot of data is housed and it can facilitate effective use of TSMO to solve problems. So that computer systems and technology, they help organize information, but they can help integrate that information then into decision-making. A few examples of that, one is from Ohio DOT. They developed a traffic operations assessment tool, or TOAST, that looks at making data-driven decisions and determining operationally sensitive corridors throughout the state and where TSMO might be able to help. A second example I'll mention is in Nevada DOT. Nevada DOT has a data warehouse and some interactive dashboards that help support integrating TSMO into their asset management efforts. And then the last area I'll highlight is business case for TSMO. Building a business case for TSMO can really encourage commitment to TSMO and show what its benefits are and where it can help address issues that the state is facing that are affecting transportation services. It can be really helpful to really make it real and provide clear examples of how TSMO can help. So a few examples from there, Michigan DOT developed a TSMO fact sheet series. Each fact sheet was targeted to specific audience that helped explain TSMO and its benefits to those audiences in a way that might be most communicate the best to that audience about what they care about. Utah DOT developed a 6-page document on keeping Utah moving by advancing TSMO, the business case, and that helped their efforts to explain TSMO and gain staff buy-in and mainstreaming it across the state. And then the last example I'll mention here is Nevada DOT. They created a business case chart that showed 8 current transportation challenges that Nevada faces and how TSMO helps to address them. It included examples from Nevada as well as from other states. So I'll close here with some steps to consider for mainstreaming TSMO based on what our research showed. One is to review current policies and processes. Identify, do they support TSMO and enhance use of TSMO, or maybe they're restricting TSMO, and maybe some changes to policies and processes could help advance TSMO and integrate it better into the agency's way of doing business. Another possible step is to meet with managers and other divisions to discuss what TSMO can offer. Would construction folks that are involved in construction or maintenance realize that, hey, if we work together and we can put effective messages on message boards that would alert drivers to maintenance crew ahead and increase safety, perhaps. or provide other information to keep, maybe tell motorists of work zones ahead so they're more prepared to stop for queues. So there are ways to work together with other divisions to discuss what TSMO can offer. As I mentioned, establishing a steering committee for coordination can be helpful, including TSMO measures in agency dashboards and in project analysis checklists and things like that can help bring some attention and better integration and mainstreaming to TSMO. So similarly for including it in key systems like asset management. And then the last is I shared a few examples about business case. Having a business case for TSMO can be really helpful to better explain what it has to offer. So to close here, I'll just mention here a few different resources that support mainstreaming TSMO. There are some self-assessments agencies can use to look at where they are and advance their capabilities. Developing a TSMO program, making a little bit more of a formal program. There's a document that can help with that. Seeing how TSMO can connect and explain it to other departments or units within the agency, as well as leadership level. There's a few resources on that. And then, of course, the National Operations Center of Excellence is a great resource for TSMO efforts. Lastly, AASHTO is working with Federal Highway on regional operations leadership forums that happen regionally around the country, and that's another great opportunity. So with that, I will close and thank you for your attention. All right, great. Now we're going to transition to our second presentation. That will be from Doug Tomlinson of Pennsylvania DOT, and he'll be talking about how PennDOT is working TSMO into their efforts throughout the project life cycle. So we'll turn to that presentation now.
Hi, I'm Doug Tomlinson from the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation, and I'm going to talk to you today about how we built Pennsylvania's TSMO program. So the slide you're looking at here is a depiction of the various regions that we have in Pennsylvania, and all of our TSMO program is based off of these regions. We have 11 engineering districts that are broken into 4 regions where we have regional traffic management centers that operate 24/7, 365. Inside those regions, some areas have smaller traffic management centers that are part-time, work certain hours of the day, certain months of the year. And the white and green lines are depicting both the turnpike and our core network. So in Pennsylvania, we have a little over 40,000 miles of roadway, and our core network is around 4,400. So those are the most important roads and the roads we focus on for transportation management. So our TSMO program has a number of components, and what I want to do is walk through how these components fit together. Like many states, we started with the capability maturity model and built from there, and that's how I will walk through the rest of the slides for you today. So when we first did our self-assessment to understand where our TSMO program stood, we fit where many other states seemed to be at the time, around the 1.5 to 2 level, some areas being better than others. We were a little disappointed, but also recognized that we were early in the program and we weren't that out of line with what states had done across the country. But our goal was really to get our program to a level 3. We felt level 3 was a reasonable target. Level 4 might not be worth the cost to get us there in many cases. For some of the categories, we might get there anyhow, but level 3 was where we're really focusing our energy. So we started with the development of a strategic framework. And what the strategic framework does is paint a high-level picture using terminology that people that aren't doing TSMO on a day-to-day basis would understand what we're talking about. And each page of the strategic framework can really be pulled out to explain the things like what is TSMO, why is TSMO important, and so on. From there, we developed a program plan, and we used the TSMO program regions I showed you on the first slide there, and met with the stakeholders in the region and had many brainstorming sessions to see what folks in the areas felt would be the most important needs when it comes to TSMO. And we settled on the ones that you see here on the slide. And then from the program plan, each of these needs were broken down into greater categories here, down into the strategy level, and then down into the action level, resulting in a plan that is approximately 100 different action items. So a lot of things that we identified that we can do to make a robust TSMO program in Pennsylvania. And we broke those actions up in such a way that we understood what it would take, which ones would tie back in to move us from a level 1 to a level 2, and then from a level 2 to a level 3, so we could focus our energy up front and not try to tackle 100 actions right away. But even trying to comprehend what it takes to move to a level 1 to a level 2 was a pretty large undertaking. So we started looking at, okay, let's track what we're doing. Let's meet on a monthly basis, get the action managers and project managers together to understand where they are at any given time, and make sure our focus is focused on, we went through the efforts, we developed a strategic framework and program plan. We identified what steps it's going to take us to go from a level 1 to a level 2 on the capability and maturity model, and we're going to start tackling that and using this tool and methodology to try to get us there. So that was the first step on the diagram there of the path that we're taking for TSMO. The next is developing a TSMO guidebook series. A series of guidebooks that look at TSMO across a range of activities at PennDOT. You'll notice there's no construction publication because we have that captured in other documents. But the planning was the first one that we really focused our efforts on, and I'll talk about how we use that document for a number of other things. The operations guidebook is nearing completion, and design is just getting underway. And then maintenance is still yet to be started, but plans are underway to get that moving here in the near future. So moving from the guidebook series, we talk about our TSMO performance program. And we set out to develop a performance program with a very simple guidance. We didn't want to establish performance metrics that said our congested roadways are congested. When we do that, the folks can't really react to it, and we feel you can get a performance program that people will look at and say, yep, that sounds good, and then set it aside, and we didn't want to do that. So we started with a simple attack of trying to develop something that the engineering districts would be able to react to, so that if I provide information from a performance perspective, it's something that you could look at, understand, and then change your business to try to get better and really improve your operations. From that program, we started developing TSMO performance reports, and we have 5 reports now available. And this gets to what I was hitting on the last slide of developing something that engineering districts can do something about. In the top left here, you see from our initial report, we recognize that some of the key activities were happening outside of one of our smaller traffic management centers operating hours. So we adjusted hours in that center based off of the performance data that we gathered. We also did a deeper dive into understanding where are the spots causing the problem, the areas where we might not be learning about situations fast enough to adequately respond. So we targeted some of those. Down on the bottom here, you'll see that we recognize that Waze and NRITS are largely 2 of the most important ways to understand what's going on. A lot of crowdsourced data being fed into it. And in many situations, we were finding out about events or not finding out about them at all after they were captured in Waze and NRITS. So we developed a number of tools, one of them being a traffic alerts dashboard, and I'll get into a few slides just giving you an idea of what some of these tools look like. So here's a picture of the traffic alerts dashboard, and this gives the user the capability of controlling what they see, how they see it. They could focus in on just their region and really tighten down the level of information so that the hottest issues that are being identified currently in Waze or NRITS are raising to the top, and we'll filter up through the hierarchy of this so that people won't miss events. And then you can look at things on a map and see how the queue is changing over time. So it's a really helpful tool for folks working in traffic management centers. We also developed a traffic operations analytics tool that allow the user to look after the fact, to go in and really dive into data, understand what it means, what's happening on the core network that I spoke about on the initial slide, those key 4,400 miles of roads, or greater level of detail, and really dive down and understand what's going on the road network so changes can be made. During the COVID time period, we recognize the importance of understanding what volumes we're doing. Obviously, congestion was lower, and there was a focus on where are we with volumes? What does that mean? Can we do some different things for work zones and peak periods that we wouldn't normally allow work zones to occur? So we created a volume analysis tool to help our engineering districts really dive into the data and understanding how volumes are changing over time. One of our recent tools here is a congestion calendar that helps people look and understand, given months of the year, given days of the week, where are they really experiencing congestion, so they can plan ahead and understand where challenges might be coming down the road so that they can plan accordingly and do the things they need to do to manage traffic effectively. And then one that we're really proud of here is the development of a PA-specific congestion pie chart. I'm sure folks have seen the charts at the top for many years depicting rural and urban congestion from a national perspective. But we developed a tool that allows us to break down what's happening in Pennsylvania at virtually any level that we want. And you can see on the graphs at the bottom there how they vary slightly from what the urban congestion graph would be up at the top, since we're looking at a deeper dive of Philadelphia. The one on the bottom right looks somewhat similar. You'll see some variations. In inclement weather, not nearly as big of a factor is the 15% on the general graphs. We've also noticed in our analysis that rubbernecking is an actual cause of congestion that we see in many locations. So it helps as we're doing a number of decision making, of really understanding where the challenges are. All these things then come together to develop our regional operations plans, identifying the congestion, how we can mitigate it, how we can use our toolbox strategies to understand what makes the most sense to try to tackle the problems that we're seeing on the roadways. So finally, you put all of that back together, and we're circling back to where we are today, which is we've walked through all of these steps, and we're back to the point where we want to do an informal survey of our stakeholders across the state of Pennsylvania here, looking at the capability maturity model again to see if we made the improvements that we think we're making. And when we look at some of the key results, the key improvements that we made through the efforts in the discussions with stakeholders, we've been able to identify funding sources that we didn't have prior to our TSMO program. We have great support for our guidebook series and the use of the performance data that we're developing, and folks are asking for more and more information that they can use to make decisions. We built strong relationships and powerful training programs that really help folks be able to continue to improve and make enhancements as we move forward. So with that, I thank you. And at the bottom of the screen here, you'll see a link to our PennDOT website. And if you search for TSMO, many of the documents and performance data that I talked about here today are available. So thanks again.
Thank you, Doug. Very interesting presentation. Hopefully we'll have some Q&A that we can delve into that a little bit further. We'll now transition to our next presentation, and this will be Chad Allen from Seattle DOT talking about some of their asset management efforts for TSMO.
Good morning, my name is Chad Allen. I'm the Asset Performance Management Program Manager for the Seattle Department of Transportation. And this morning we're going to talk a little bit about how integrating ITS and other TSMO assets into SDOT's asset management program. For those of you who have been to Seattle, you know that Seattle is at its most vibrant and thriving when our community members are going places, safely walking and biking and moving along our healthy streets. As stewards of the public transportation system, our customers require safe, reliable, and dependable transportation services. For the Seattle Department of Transportation to meet this expectation, we need to ensure that our assets and transportation investments that we deliver to meet those expectations are provided for in a sustainable and equitable manner. Now, we all know that mobility is at the heart of a livable city, and its delivery is predicated on a successful TSMO program. The credibility of such a program is built on safety and reliability, which in turn requires healthy TSMO assets, which are realized by making investments in our transportation system in a proactive and holistic manner, and that are in alignment with asset management best practices. During this presentation, I want you to consider how you view the relationship between TSMO and asset management. To kick things off, let's view a structural representation of how TSMO and asset management work together to achieve mobility goals and objectives. Personally, I like to look at an organization's strategic goals and objectives, and I ask myself, what do I see at the heart of those objectives? What are those goals trying to accomplish for our stakeholders? What are they trying to provide to them? For some goals, it's safety related, and for others, it might be related to asset condition. However, for many of our strategic goals, mobility is a desired goal. So I want you to ask yourself this: what are the key supports within your management framework that support mobility? In SDOT, two critical pieces are asset management and TSMO. The triangle visualization is meant to convey that TSMO and asset management are critical to mobility and show how both TSMO and asset management must work together to support mobility goals and objectives. For example, if you remove either the TSMO or the asset management triangle, then the gray mobility triangle is destabilized and will tip either to the left or to the right, causing those strategic goals and objectives sitting on top to kind of fall off the table, if you will. When this happens, it impacts the ability of the transportation department to meet its mobility objectives, further reducing its ability to achieve its overall mission and vision. And while the previous slide visualized the structural relationship between TSMO and asset management, now I want to kind of look at the squishier side of things. Let's take a moment to consider how these important programs coexist together. TSMO and asset management both work toward enhancing system performance with similar processes, but they have different perspectives. While asset management is concerned with preserving or improving the condition of our assets, TSMO is focused on preserving and maximizing mobility. Both TSMO and asset management systems both share a strategic and systematic data-driven risk-based approach towards monitoring performance. And as we move through the presentation today, I hope the relationship becomes a little clearer and more in focus, and that you're able to see how these are more alike than they are different. So how do we integrate TSMO into asset management and move these circles closer together? I kind of boiled it down into 6 steps, probably oversimplified it a little bit. But step 1 here, you want to identify the assets you own or maintain. So you got to know what you have. And not only do you have to know what you have, you have to know where it's located. So where are your assets? Where are they located? And what condition are your assets in? Regardless of whatever type of format you choose for your assets, good, fair, poor, excellent, we got to kind of understand what buckets we're putting those asset conditions in, because we have to identify and communicate what our needs are. We have to be able to communicate to the stakeholders, the council, hey, we have these assets, they're in this condition, and then we need to understand what do we have to do to keep and preserve those assets in a certain condition state. So we develop asset management lifecycle plans for these different assets. We assess what they need and at what points in the lifespan are they going to need those maintenance improvements or capital investments. Then the hard part comes, we got to coordinate the maintenance work and capital investments and in such a way that we minimize the impact to our community. So step 1, we want to identify the assets that we own and maintain. And here on the screen, what you see some of the ITS assets that we own in SDOT and we maintain. And SDOT puts together a report on our 47 different assets and their condition about every 5 years. And so this is the year that we're going to be reporting again on our status and condition, and the 2020 report is just about ready to be published. So our second step, know where your assets are located. SDOT uses Esri GIS tool to understand what assets we have as a visualization tool to be able to communicate internally as well as externally some of the attribute data that's critical to the effective management of each of our assets, which in turn is critical to the effective mobility management of the entire transportation system. Step 3, assess the condition of your assets. I know there's a lot of information on this screen. You've seen the information to the left already. That's what we have. And then far over to the far right, you see the condition assessment. This conveys the information to you as to what condition state our beacons, our cameras, our counters, our radio towers are in. And what you'll notice is that some of the information on the far right includes a column that's called unknown. Sometimes we don't know what the condition of some of these assets are in, and so we're notifying that or noting that as unknown. Those could be realized as a gap in knowing the condition of our assets, although some of the assets are kind of a run to failure, if you will, type of asset. But we want to use this data from our TSMO assets to increase reliability while decreasing congestion, increasing overall system safety and performance. Understanding the condition of our assets can help us identify condition-based mobility risks before they become an issue that we have to react to. Remember, we want to be proactive in our maintenance approach, and we want to look holistically across the system to be less reactive on the whole. So step 4, identifying and communicating your asset needs. What you see here is you see a needs forecast for our ITS assets. And you see a general how much is needed for traffic cameras, the beacon assemblies, the network hubs. It's all different color coded. It's a 20-year analysis. And what this graph tells us is that the amount of need from about 2021 goes from about 22 million to a little over 35 million by 2039. So this is a way for us to develop an understanding of the asset needs, which helps the TSMO team to begin discussing data quality and system management initiatives to help communicate the financial challenges that we face. You know, whether it be our traffic and safety assets or ITS assets, we're working closely with our TSMO subject matter experts, has enabled our team, the asset management team, to identify critical maintenance work and strategic capital improvements that are necessary to take those next steps towards improving the overall operation, safety, and sustainability of these assets. So step 5, again, once we understand what our asset needs are, we can develop an asset management lifecycle plan. And this can help convey the properly timed preservation and maintenance strategies that we need to employ to keep those good and fair assets in good and fair condition longer. In doing that, we know that we can save money over the long run while providing a better service to our customers. So understanding what maintenance and capital investments must be made and when helps to communicate those asset needs. So future projections should also include the best prediction of how the assets must be managed. And then sometimes that can be kind of hard to nail down related to, especially related to automated and connected vehicles. But what we do know is that both TSMO and asset management must work together and play a significant role in the successful implementation of that future. And step 6, so this is where this final step here is really loaded. I probably oversimplified it, but I think this is something kind of we're kind of all struggling with a little bit, and it can kind of be difficult to know what to do and when. But for me, this is part of the challenging puzzle that we face. How do we weave our transportation tapestry together in the best manner to meet our community's needs with limited impact? And I think of how we must move forward conducting things like trade-off analyses across different network levels and across funding levels, across asset levels. And it's true, we face tough questions, from our stakeholders, from our communities, but we must also be able to provide tough answers, backed by quality data with an understanding of the risks that we face. So how do we achieve the desired performance and align our transportation plans with each other to streamline those efforts, those supportive efforts to ensure that we're maximizing mobility, maintaining asset condition, these are all open-ended questions, but SDOT is taking a key step towards providing some definition to this challenge. It's kind of like the puzzle, kind of providing that outline of that border. And so let me share with you a few key steps that we're taking towards constructing this outline as we move forward and completing our integration of ITS assets into our asset management program. So SDOT is currently working on developing a risk register for its TSMO-related assets. And this risk register is meant to monitor and report on those risks that impact our performance. How can we do better? What are those risks that we're facing? And once we understand the risks, and we're going to be moving forward with a transportation asset management roadmap. And so we know that these assets, this TSMO assets, are consistently underfunded. And that's due to some of the difficult choices that the city must make in balancing its transportation budget each year. Maintenance for many of these assets, including those TSMO assets and ITS assets, constitute an unfunded liability. So current funding levels are promoting a reactive approach, like we don't have enough money to do the maintenance, but we've got to make sure we do the maintenance because we can keep our assets in as best condition as possible. We want to be more proactive, less reactive in our approach. So we need that asset management plan. We need to understand what's coming and what we need to be prepared for. So developing a roadmap of improvement initiatives based on our transportation asset management risk register as we work with our TSMO team will ensure that TSMO and asset management are working together towards maximizing mobility and performance across Seattle.
Thank you, Chad. That's a great insight into Seattle's efforts at TSMO asset management. So now we will move to Denise Marco of the Eastern Transportation Coalition. She's going to talk a bit about freight and TSMO and some of their efforts to look at how those interact.
Hi, my name is Denise Marco, and I'm the director for the TSMO program for the Eastern Transportation Coalition. We were formerly the I-95 Corridor Coalition and changed our name last year, so thanks for having me today. Before I start, though, to talk about the cross-cutting topics that we're seeing today, I wanted to give you a very brief update of who exactly the coalition is. We are a coalition comprised of 17 DOT member agencies from Maine to Florida, Alabama and Tennessee, as well as the District of Columbia. These are our full voting members, and we have over 190 affiliate agencies that are turnpike authorities, planning commissions, municipalities, etc. And as you can see from the slide, the metrics of the states are pretty impressive. The region is considered to be the third largest economy in the world. We have over $2 trillion in annual domestic trade, 40% of the population, 30% of our nation's jobs are here, 35% of VMT, and 21% of the U.S. roads, along with 28 ports. So there's a lot going on in this region related to transportation. So for the coalition, here's how we're structured. I'm going to start down and move up, meaning that we have a 7,000 member database who participate in 3 program areas: TSMO, freight, and innovations. Program committees, they each have program chairs or co-chairs to guide our planning. There's a common steering committee that includes these chairs, and they guide our annual work plan. The staff, the coalition staff, is comprised of 8 full-time and part-time members, and we report to our executive board that consists of all of the CEOs of our member states. There's one chair of the executive board, that's Greg Slater from the Secretary of Maryland, and 4 other vice chairs from the various agencies. So today I'm going to talk about the cross-cutting topics that you're seeing in the coalition where these 2 programs of TSMO and freight overlap. Here's the agenda. We're going to start off with a little bit about road congestion and safety metrics. Why is this convergence of TSMO and freight important? We'll look at traveler information, getting the word out to truckers, data portals, and third-party apps, as well as the need for work zone information. We'll touch on truck parking, whether it's rest areas or emergency parking, and we'll finish up with incident management, responding to large like TT crashes and what's needed for that. Okay, so I think we would all agree that road congestion is a critical safety issue. This data is a little older, but the major trends are still valid. for what's happening today. Crashes are increasing. 30% are occurring on the interstates due to road congestion and poor stopping. A truck traveling here at 65 miles per hour takes 66% longer to brake and stop than a passenger vehicle. Here, you can see that in Indiana, again, a little bit older data, but still showing the common trends we see today. Based on 230 fatal crashes, accidents involving trucks accounted for about 18%. So needless to say, road issues, freight, trucking, it's important, and it's important to safety. So let's talk about how we get better information out to our truckers, better traveler information, because that's a core TSMO strategy and a true cross-cutting effort. What information do truckers want or need? Well, they need road condition information, incidents, delays. They need construction and work zone locations, or oversized and overweight restrictions, or weather and pavement conditions, way station, electronic screening sites, and detour information that's really truck friendly. How are they getting that information, though, is interesting. Public websites and data portals, yes. The transportation agencies or TMCs have message boards or website or email text, even their 511 company dispatcher or fleets that monitor sites and provide information, get information to truckers. Radio, down below there's the Turnpike. Florida Turnpike is currently doing a pilot with iHeartRadio to take their highway advisory radio from AM to a digital platform. Again, something that truckers listen to a lot. Weather services are important. And then again, we have the apps that are the truck-specific general apps. The coalition maintains a CVO or commercial vehicle portal. This provides quick links for truckers, and it's maintained and updated quarterly for new information and links. The portal provides a one-stop shop for those looking for CVO information that's being offered by each state. And then there's many third-party mapping providers out there, and not all of them are appropriate for truckers, such as Waze being a perfect example. So we need to better develop data feeds that can be pushed to mapping apps as well as in trucking apps. And the key is providing real-time notification as to what's happening on the roadway. So work needs to be done with these third-party providers. The real-time notifications are key. This slide kind of shows you the value of a timely alert. And without the alert, the trucking cab in the red down below, it's more of a dangerous scenario. There's less time to react. It's a congested scenario. The driver's got fewer options. With a proactive one, though, the driver's a safer situation. They can react quicker. So again, by slowing down, a truck is also slowing down traffic around it. So key to trucking apps and trucking information is really real-time notifications. We currently in the coalition now work with NRITS, who's partnered with a company called Drivewise. They're developing an app that will push real data to truckers. North Carolina and New Jersey are currently working on pilots with this app. But as you can see, it shows real-time monitoring of a nationwide network, and it detects and characterizes closures, queues, and slowdowns, and every minute it updates. So we're doing a pilot now. Hopefully we'll have results come back sometime next year that we can bring to the community. So recommendations, what are we thinking? From a coalition standpoint, obviously we need to provide better information to truckers. We need to improve on providing timely notifications. We need to work with the trucking app providers to determine what they really need and in what format, and then we need to work to define a common data source. Very similar to what the coalition is currently doing with Waze and the Waze engineering team in terms of how to improve a common data source to get information out to the travelers. So let's talk about work zones and how the information about these are important to truckers. I mean, what is it? They need information about restrictions. They need height, weight, width. They need also to know about detours, alternate routing. We saw in an earlier slide about the importance of back of queue notifications. And given our new world, so to speak, with the tremendous increase in freight, thanks to folks like Amazon and that just-in-time delivery concept, these are all impacted by road congestion, which is caused by many times their work zones. So a major initiative this year is to work more closely with the Work Zone Data Exchange Working Group to see how we can move forward to develop the right data fields that are needed to push work zone data out to truckers. This slide, another hot topic for the coalition is truck parking and providing safe places to park and rest during emergencies. Here are some dangerous configurations that we're seeing with truck parking today. The left picture has a truck in the decel or entrance lane or in the middle, the truck is in the hatched parking no area, in hatched no parking area, excuse me. And on the right, the truck's in an assigned no parking area. So again, dangerous places for truckers to be parking to rest. And then there's emergency truck parking. I'm sure that you've all seen some of these videos that are showing multi-vehicle pileups, many with large tractor trailers involved. This really kind of emphasized the need to find a solution to providing emergency truck parking where truckers can safely stay off the road. This is a sample of a map that was developed by the GIS folks at the Maryland State Highway Administration. It depicts regular truck parking along with locations that considered emergency trucks are open. I guess how to explain that. Green parking symbols represent regular truck parking on a daily basis. Blue means it's emergency truck parking. So these are open during severe weather operations. One of our discussions in the coalition has been to how to develop a common map across crosses jurisdictions to bring better regional information to truckers. And then there's the topic and the discussion of reserved truck parking. Is this really the future of truck parking? Issues that we have to consider, does a continued expansion of truck parking spaces, if it's a private pay to park, is that going to add to capacity? Or does the additional truck parking capacity diminish the public sector in providing truck parking? Basically, is the issue to be left to the private sector? Big discussion. Can a business model be built into local land use and commercial development? So a lot of issues to consider with truck parking. Where does the industry stand on this? What's the data on trucker willingness to pay for parking? And lastly, are there safety implications? Given that most drivers do not get paid to park, could a reserved pay to park concept take money from places like vehicle maintenance? So even though we're talking about truck parking, we're talking about rest areas and emergency, the reserved truck parking issue still has a lot to be considered. So recommendations for this. We all agree that the proliferation of the movement of goods, access to safe truck parking is becoming an essential function. No argument there. More dialogue needed about how to provide safe truck parking, whether through the public sector. There's a need to provide real-time emergency parking locations, especially in severe weather. And again, that's I think a real initiative of the coalition to see how we can do that. And with the traveler information to truckers, I think the information we're providing from a traveler information perspective to trucking apps, we also need to start to look at that same process for truck parking apps, difference, to find out what they really need and in what format. So those are our recommendations for truck parking. So then there's the discussion, I guess this last segment involves incident management and how we're working with our agency stakeholders. It's a little different. It's not the public. This is more of our agency stakeholders, the fire, police, both local and state enforcement, and the towing community, how we're working with them to clear like large tractor trailer accidents, because we know that they often impact and close roads for large periods of time. So what we can do to keep engaged with our agency community. So our recommendations for this is to continue to work and train agency stakeholders. We do this through our highway operations groups. This is our network, our regional network of police, fire, law enforcement, towing, a group, maintenance, DOT maintenance folks, DOT TSMO folks, who come together in in-person network exchanges. We hold in-person tabletops. Now that we can do that, we're looking forward this year to going back to it. We want to continue the national TIM training within these meetings as well. And we want to look to engage the towing community, or bring what I call the towers to the training table, looking at things like how they use their rotational lists, or how they certify their towers, or how they train. So again, keeping the incident management community up to speed and involved is something that's key to the coalition. So in summary, these are our focus areas. We're looking at traveler information for trucks, how we can get better information, truck parking, how can we improve emergency truck parking locations, how can we improve safe locations with rest areas, and then lastly, from an incident management perspective, how can we keep our responder community trained to improve upon, particularly when responding and recovering from large tractor trailer accidents. So with that being said, that's my presentation. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Denise. Very interesting to talk about the intersection there between TSMO and freight and how there are some of those unique needs that maybe change some aspects of how we would deliver TSMO and when our freight is the audience and the target area. So now we'll turn to our last presentation, last but certainly not least, is Brent Kane of the Arizona Department of Transportation. And just a reminder to put any items in the chat pod for any questions, and we'll be turning to that after this presentation.
Hey, good afternoon. My name's Brent Kane. I'm with the Arizona Department of Transportation. I'm the TSMO director for the department, and I'm going to be talking to you about building a TSMO program, what we've done here in Arizona. So thank you for attending and listening to this webinar. So just to give you some background on what we've done at ADOT, Arizona Department of Transportation, was we actually stood up a TSMO division back in October of 2015. I was instrumental in that. I was appointed to essentially be the division director. Prior to that, I was the deputy for urban operations, and I was heavily involved in the operations side, but also essentially in standing up this new division within ADOT. I did quite a bit of research in what other states have done, Florida, Iowa, Colorado, other areas, and using the National Operations Center of Excellence as well too, to really kind of figure out how it best fit for Arizona. Really the starting point that initiated the division for TSMO here in Arizona is what Federal Highways rolled out with their Sharp 2 initiative. It was really the starting point of how we essentially birthed TSMO here in Arizona. Nobody knew what even TSMO was back in the mid 2010. So we started with the capability maturity model back in March of 2014. We did a reassessment of that in early 17. We also had a program planning workshop in 2017, and that really kind of developed the framework on moving forward once to initiate development of the division. Obviously, it's operation focused. It's really to preserve capacity, improve safety in our system, and also reliability. I'll share with you as well too the division, and it may be different, have different meaning in different areas of the nation. Other states use bureaus, but the TSMO division here at ADOT is at executive level. There are 6 divisions within ADOT. TSMO being one of those, MPD, for example, another one, or Enforcement Compliance Division as well. So it's at that executive level. It really gives that line of sight on the operation and focus with operations. So, and lastly, also, we're about a division about 300 FTEs. So developing the culture for TSMO has really started out with developing that business case, why and how, and what that's going to look like. Having the executive leadership is extremely important. It was fundamental, at least for Arizona DOT. Our director and current director, John Halikowski, was very supportive of the TSMO efforts and what AASHTO and Federal Highways was doing. And really, we wanted to empower and support staff, just not from the top down, but bottom up, to really understand the focus and purpose of operations and the benefits behind that, and get their buy-in. The roadmap and guiding principles, plan for operations, identifying priorities for improving the operations, looking at various strategies, specific strategies, and of course we need to track the methods and performance metrics, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. Then monitor, measure, and market the effects of the program, and obviously remove those silos. Not working just with my sister division that does the program planning, development, design, construction, and maintenance, but also other divisions within the agency as well too, sharing how the importance of operations and how that functions within the state and the benefits behind that, and sharing that information. So this slide just kind of gives an overview of the division. It's broken out into 7 groups. It mentions about 300 FTEs. I have it essentially there's, and I won't go into specifics, but kind of going clockwise, the traffic management group really kind of focuses in on the traffic operations center, our traffic incident, weather incident, emergency management. Our systems management group is more on the maintenance administration, oversized, overweight. What we call Class C permits is also housed in that as well too. We got the business group that does a lot of administration, the HR budget, procurement activities. And we also have a group called Operational Traffic and Safety. This is where HSIP is located within the state. We also have our traffic engineering section in there as well too. And we develop our strategic transportation safety plan in this area. A lot of the safety efforts are done in that group. Systems maintenance to our signal operations, our ITS maintenance, our lighting. We manage our fiber, our ramp metering, our DMS signs, that kind of efforts underneath the systems maintenance. And our systems technology, where our emerging technology. I thought this is important to stand this group up. We're developing the division. As we all know, we see and are aware of with the emerging technologies, we want to make sure ADOT government is ahead. I wouldn't say ahead, but getting into this, being very aware of the technology of connected autonomous vehicles and other technologies in our infrastructure to be more proactive versus reactive. In the traffic maintenance, looking at our sighting and striping and our sign factory as well too. When I launched the division, we actually obviously need to have the goals, objectives, plans, and we had brought on a consultant to really identify immediate, near-term, and long-term recommendations. And these are really measured, I think, in relatively short means, 2 years for the immediate, 2 to 4 years for near, and long-term 4+ years. And just kind of strategize, we're well into that, but we're also currently in the process now of procuring an ITS master plan on the street. And that is really to establish a strategic plan for deployment of our ITS technologies to address the current and future initiatives. It's really to evaluate the strategies and develop an implementation roadmap, and it help us identify the priorities where we want to focus our funding. This ITS master plan is going to be very live and active. It's going to be very short term because things change rapidly with technology, but it's also going to be help funded through our 5-year capital program. We actually have a sub-program called Smart Highway Technology Investments, roughly about $5 million a year to really help fund this effort as well too for TSMO. So very excited. It's a means to really move forward with the technology and supporting TSMO. So I mentioned before about performance measures. I know this is impossible to read, and the intent is really not to read this, but to showcase that what gets measured gets done. When I stood up the division, one of the first things is that we need to develop the measures. How are we doing? What are we measuring? How well we're performing? And identifying just the measures, but also targets to those measures. And then with the targets, we look at countermeasures. So we meet on a monthly basis, the group managers, and we go through each of the group managers conveys how their metrics are doing. If they're not performing, what are the countermeasures that they're doing to get to that target? Also, we want to embrace the red. Red is good. We hate to see watermelons. The last thing we want to do from a cultural standpoint is, it's green on the outside, like a watermelon, green on the outside, red on the inside. We want to embrace the red so we understand the issues. It's no blame, no judgment. We look at the process. That's what we're trying to fix. It's just not from the division level. This happens at the agency level as well too. Other divisions have their own reporting mechanisms that we meet on a monthly basis. So executive leadership, I report out on what the division is doing with other divisions, vice versa. And then the director actually takes this to the cabinet and shares his metrics to at the governor's level. So it cascades up and it cascades down. So just to briefly talk about some of the efforts that we've been doing and have done and moving forward with TSMO in Arizona, looking at, of course, looking at improving the mobility and the safety and the reliability in our system. looking at bottleneck mitigation in the Phoenix area. I could have a presentation just on this in itself. We were awarded through NOCO a couple years back on efforts we did, some restriping efforts at one of our system TIs to really reduce the number of daily incident crashes in that area. It was just a huge high BC. I think it was around 1,200 benefit cost. Significant was just restriping and some signage. VSL and other states are doing that as well. We also stood up a incident response unit about a year and a half ago, a dedicated unit in the Phoenix region. Huge impact, very beneficial. It's really get out there. They're roving, removing debris, push, pull, drag vehicles, getting that clearance and removing those potential secondary crashes. And also with the Traffic Operations Center kind of being the hub for all that. Also the wrong way detection system. This is something we created a couple years ago, piloted where first in the nation using thermal detection. We're rolling this out throughout the state, statewide travel times to help the traveling public understand if there's traffic closures, give that time, and also potential route choice change or opportunities. Looking at traffic signal optimization across the state, basically feeding that back to a location so we can change signal timings on the fly, and adaptive ramp metering, which we've developed on a one particular corridor. We're rolling that out in other areas through the state, another means to really squeeze more out of the system. Looking at data decisions and performance management, we also we're in the process of converting all of our high pressure sodium to LED, huge cost savings with that. We just did that in the tunnel here in the downtown area, $185,000 savings a year. We're going to roll that back into the conversion to LEDs throughout the state. Also, our desk detection system, which uses a variable speed limit reduction automated system, that went live about a year and a half ago. It's proven, it's been tested, and it's a great success story for ADOT. Also, we're looking at from a regional standpoint. We have the I-10 Corridor Coalition working with Texas, New Mexico, California, and ourselves. Texas was the lead agency that was awarded the ATC NPD grant a couple of years ago, looking at smart parking, kind of similar to what MASHTO's done in the Midwest. Also, we're doing another ATC NPD grant here in the Phoenix region on the Loop 101 mobility project with ICM, which is about a 61-mile corridor. Exciting stuff with that. We have the Super Bowl coming up and looking at ways how we can integrate that. And then other efforts I just want to touch on very quickly is the Regional Operation Forum. Shout out to Federal Highway. They developed this pilot program several years back. AASHTO is now moving forward with this program to really engage TSMO champions throughout the nation and share best practices across the state. This also ties into the NCHRP effort with the new Transportation Operations Manual that's going to be produced this fall. It's really authoritative source that represents state of operations and practice. So it's similar to the Green Book or Highway Capacity Manual or Highway Safety Manual. It's going to be one of its kind. It's really the showcase the TSMO efforts. With that, I appreciate your time and look forward to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Brent. Very informative about Arizona DOT's efforts and some of the things going on nationally. We'll now enter our Q&A session. So I would welcome the presenters to join me on screen and get ready for some questions. You're still welcome to enter questions in the chat pod that we can answer during the discussion time. So just to start with some of the questions we've gotten so far from our audience. Question for Chad. Is Seattle's asset management tied to a work order system so that it updates as they do maintenance and capital work?
Yes, the answer is yes. We do have a work order system. Both the asset condition data for the TSMO assets and the work orders are updated into our N4 for public service asset management system.
Okay, thank you, Chad. We did get a question for Denise. talking about congestion and the kind of tie between congestion and safety. That congestion might result in more crashes, but they're typically lower severity and less likely to result in fatalities and injuries, even with freight. So how does that relate to capacity improvements and justifying them looking at some of the safety issues?
Tracy, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay. I think I answered in the chat. I think it's a good question to ask. I do think that you have to look at it as a balance because the economy is changing today with the increase of online purchasing and people staying home and Amazon. You have an exponential increase of the number of trucks on the roadway these days. So we need to look at, from a network capacity and roadway network management standpoint, how do you balance those two together? So I think it's important to look at both. That was my question. I think that you have, one of the metrics and slides I showed had to do with the rear end collisions can be very severe. They can be just as fatal as some others. So again, I think it's a balance. Is my answer to that?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Denise. Yeah. As we're looking at both congestion and safety, I think there's a lot of need to look at the kind of multi-variables when we look at investments and decisions, because certainly it doesn't just affect one thing. Question for Doug. You mentioned in your presentation a congestion calendar and a Pennsylvania specific congestion pie chart that you all developed. How did you go about developing those? Kind of what data were used? Who did you need to work with to make that happen?
So over time, pretty much everything that I shared has all been developed in-house. We have a unit that works for me that focuses on systems and performance tools. So pretty much all the software, all the performance tools that we build in-house. We started originally trying to contract things out, but it's hard because we adjust and change so rapidly based off of the feedback we're gathering from the districts and others and what the data is showing us. So we wanted to be able to quickly make the tools necessary to solve the problems that we're identifying. So our IT shop has been very willing to work with us. We have a crew of people that are very good at all of these different tools. So between my staff identifying the needs and laying out the requirements of what we want these things to do and working with our own internal IT shop, we're able to build them. And then from the data perspective, it's pulling from whatever data sources we have access to. So it can be our own internal road condition reporting system, information from Waze and NRITS, RWIS, you name it. I mean, we keep trying to pull in new data tools to see whatever we can get the best information from. So it's a wide range of things.
All right, thank you, Doug. We had a question for Brent. Could you talk a little bit about your bottleneck mitigation efforts that you made a reference to in your presentation?
Certainly. Here in the Phoenix region, there's challenges with the congestion. So one of the things we looked at is essentially where those are happening and try to understand why they're happening, of course, using analysis, but identifying those bottlenecks and then simply using TSMO methods and means to hopefully address some of these, really looking at the root cause, just not looking at an answer. We need to widen the infrastructure. But what can we do with simply with say striping or restriping some of these efforts to make it more operational and help with these bottlenecks? Obviously, it's not going to fix significant capacity problems, but we're looking at from a TSMO perspective of how we can reduce those. So we've got numerous examples where we have done that, and I mentioned one in the presentation as well too, of some restriping. Huge benefits.
All right, thank you, Brent. Let's see, question for Denise. With automated trucks potentially becoming more prevalent, do you think truck parking will still be an issue in the future? Say if we look 20 years out, a little further out down the line.
I feel like I need a Ouija board for that one, or an 8-ball. But, gosh. I'm thinking yes, that we're still down the road. I mean, technology comes and it sometimes it's a snail's pace, sometimes it's lightning speed, and then we have to go back and revisit. There's a lot of work going on with the connected world of trucking. A lot of platooning, a lot of pilots. But I do think that right now it's still a manual override. There's still drivers that are in there that it's not by itself yet. This is me talking. I still think that 20 years out, there's still going to be a need for even emergency trucking. When you have snow and ice, how is an automated truck going to continue? We don't know. I think there's just too many variables to say yes or no. Will it be an issue? I think personally it'll still be here because I think we need it. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Brent or Doug, what do you guys think of? What do you think of it? You guys are working with that stuff, right? Is NITE doing something out with the automated trucking?
Yeah, this is Brent. I'll jump in, and I would agree. It's just like with the connected side as well, too, with AVs. It's going to take some time. We're seeing in our state there is a lot of AV trucks that are happening. They're piloting, they're testing, they're making runs from say Tucson to Texas, and with the I-10 corridor, go with a corridor with the freight coming from the ports of LA, Long Beach, and California crossing through our state. I agree with you. It's going to be a while. There still needs to be a lot of work to be done. Even the consistency of how the work zones go from state to state, how those trucks can manage through that. But the parking in itself, they still have to stop somewhere, of course. There's likely going to be a person in that cab for a while until they get the system, essentially work through. But I would agree with you. It's going to be some time yet.
And Tracy, one other response to that is that it's just like when you look at road and weather operations as a TSMO strategy, how road and weather operations managed out west is very different than how they're managed in the east, like the New England states, it's a different different geography, it changes. So I think there's going to be a lot of research on how do you manage run on the I-95 corridor as opposed to I-80. So I think there's a lot of that going on too.
Okay, thanks, Denise. Anyone else want to comment before we move to another question?
So, I think it's going to take some time until we see how it actually rolls out. So, it's just too early to understand what is it going to look like when they start getting mixed in with the overall fleet, and what are they doing with them in between shipments or however the things are actually operating to know whether or not these things park or they could just keep going all the time. So I think it's just too early to understand that yet.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's the timelines for many of these things are certainly challenging to predict, but good to keep in mind. Let's see, we have a question for Brent. Can you comment on the observed or expected benefits of the adaptive ramp metering project, particularly compared to a pre-timed or static ramp metering approach?
No, great question. Appreciate that. We looked at a particular corridor here in the Phoenix region, and we actually developed an adaptive algorithm for the system, and we tested it, we've tried it, and looking obviously with adaptive ramp metering, looking upstream, downstream of the queuing up on the ramp and releasing those vehicles versus just in Arizona, I call them stupid ramp metering. It's just, it's just a stop and go essentially, and people would time themselves how to get through there. But with adaptive, it really holds the folks back further up stream and really regulates those to get on the freeway. It has made a difference in the congestion level. It's not the panacea, the solution, but it did, I believe, if I remember right, it was like an 8% reduction pre-pandemic we actually are rolling this algorithm out, adaptive ramp metering out throughout the rest of the area in the Phoenix area when we're turning the lights essentially back on with the ramp meters. And it's actually shown in those cases as well too, very consistent and productive means to keep that main line flowing well. So the cost for us to develop that algorithm was maybe like $200,000. It was really, again, from a TSMO perspective, very small cost for huge benefit for the system. So.
Yeah, great example of the benefits of TSMO and the great benefit cost that can often be achieved. And we had another question come in for you, Brent, about what would you recommend for how to get stakeholders to buy into an organizational structure similar to your structure, you know, with having started a new division and getting buy-in on the restructuring? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's another great question. And, you know, it came from the director, but also it was really started with Sharp 2 and Federal Highways. It really kind of initiated that. And it continues to really push and advocating TSMO. There's a wealth of information on Federal Highways website, as well as National Operations Center of Excellence. They have case examples. So when we stood up the division, it was really explaining what TSMO was and the benefits behind it. And I think now being, you know, 5 years into it, we've got excellent examples of what we've done with TSMO that likely would have happened. And showcasing the benefit costs, it's just outstanding. So I think having examples and looking what other states are doing as well too, I think will give you a great plethora of information that can be shared, the benefits behind TSMO. So even though we did a division here in Arizona, that doesn't mean you need to have a division elsewhere. And other states are doing different things. It's not a one size fits all. So I would just embrace TSMO and try to work that how it best fits within your agency. So.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I know at Federal Highway, we've seen that, you know, in some places that was a great way to advance TSMO within the organization. And in other places, they've taken other approaches and that's worked well. So it isn't one size fits all, as you said. Anyone else want to comment on that question?
So for us in Pennsylvania, we found that we had enough people working on TSMO from the state perspective under my shop. And it wasn't directly under secretary, it wasn't super high up in the organization, you know, like trying to create a higher direct report level. But we realized that once we started just coordinating and having the conversations with people in planning and IT and other areas, we were able to get the buy-in and support through open communication rather than spending years of trying to go at it ourselves. So once we engaged people and asked for their opinions in the design community and the planning community, we've been very successful of getting them to recognize that they were trying to solve the things that we were trying to solve. We were just somewhat doing it in a vacuum. And then once we started working together, a lot of the obstacles kind of just broke away. And we stopped at that point trying to worry about where it was in the organization.
Okay, yeah, that's a great point. The communication is so key. Chad, a question for you. What was the most challenging aspect of integrating ITS and other TSMO assets into Seattle DOT's asset management system? Was there anything in particular that was challenging and kind of bigger hurdle to overcome?
Well, I think Doug was kind of touching on it a little bit, and Denise said it well too, with balance. So I think like a certain amount of communicating across the different teams and recognizing that there are like still silos out there and trying to figure out ways, especially on the data side of things, that we can kind of unify the data and make sure that we're all using the same data, that we're all communicating our needs upward. And I think probably on an organizational leadership level, just understanding that we kind of need to set a strategic direction as to where we want to go. In Seattle, a large portion of our funding comes from 9-year levies, and we're in a levy right now, and the 2 prior ones kind of were a little, not, I didn't say polar opposites, but one kind of focused on maintenance, and then another one, the next one or the last one we had kind of focused on, had a lot of bright, capital investments, bright shiny new objects. Some of that's related to the amount of expansion and growth that Seattle's been seeing over the last 10 or so years. So a lot of that is valid or validated. It's just having a strategic direction as to, hey, this is where we're going. Seattle's got like 5 master plans. You got a freight plan, a ped plan, a bike plan, transportation plan, and transit plan. So it's each of those plans are communicating objectives that they want to achieve. And right now we're in the process of integrating those plans, providing that strategic direction. I think that will kind of help us transition into the future more readily and easier.
Yeah, that makes sense. We found even as organizations were developing TSMO plans, you can't develop them in a vacuum because there are these other plans that exist and everything needs to somehow fit together. So certainly a good point there.
Tracy?
Yes.
Tracy, could I piggyback a little bit on what Doug mentioned too? What I'm hearing is I think when you're in a organization and you're wanting to build TSMO, you want to get that message across. I think the importance of performance measures and pulling data is really, really important, because many times someone will say, well, your message board, how many accidents did you prevent today by putting that message on the board? How do you measure that? But sometimes it's very difficult to bring the TSMO mentality to folks that are focusing on the good state of repair. So bringing data to the table, I think, is important. Doug showed some great metrics on his presentation. Always bringing data with you so that you're not just talking, in circles up above about how great it is. Having that hardcore data and those measures, I think, are important.
Yeah, I think perhaps every single presentation brought up the data or the measures in some fashion, an indication of, even though we were talking about different aspects, how critical that is. A question for Brent. Do you have any sense at this point of when the Transportation Operations Manual will be available? Is there kind of a expected timeline for that?
So just to clarify, I noted that in the presentation. So right now it's with NCHRP 03126, but that panel is working. I actually chair that to wrap that up this fall. We are working closely with AASHTO, CTSO, to essentially develop that, roll that into a publication essentially early, or I shouldn't say early, but April, May of next year. The Transportation Operations Manual, as I noted, it's going to be comparable to like a highway capacity manual, a highway safety manual, but it's really focused on operations and more specifically on TSMO. So it is going to be a wealth of information for folks to utilize, and it's reading it, reviewing it. It's going to be a very good thing for TSMO overall. So looking forward to getting that rolled out. And again, with the RALFs, that will be incorporated into the RALF effort that Federal Highways has initiated, and that will hopefully be continued forward as well too. So.
All right, thank you, Brent. Well, we had a couple more questions here that unfortunately we're not going to be able to get to as we wrap up this session, but a few of us will be able to be in the Wonder Room if anyone wants to come over there and continue the conversation. And then I would like to thank each of our panelists. I think that's some very interesting aspects to TSMO and how it contributes to improving all that we do in transportation and when we better integrate it. So just thank you all for attending today as well. As a reminder, to receive PDH credits, you must first view the entire webinar, live or recorded. So those of you who are here today have done that. And then complete the evaluation associated with that, and then your credit certificate will be unlocked and available in the certificates tab in your ITE Learning Hub account. The evaluation link for this technical session is also could be posted in the questions pod so you can access it there. Just a reminder that the recording for this session will be available in the IT Learning Hub within the next 48 hours for all meeting registrants. So thank you again for everyone for joining us today, and another thank you for our panelists for sharing their wisdom with us about how they've been working to bake TSMO into various aspects of what we do in transportation. And that concludes the session. Thank you all.